With Session Update, I'm Julie Bartke. The Minnesota Senate rolled out its tax bill on Tuesday. It's a proposal the Senate author, Rod Skoe, says accomplishes the tasks of balancing a $627 million budget deficit, invests in economic development, and reforms the tax structure in several areas. It also includes a revision to the income tax. It does not include a fourth-tier income tax bracket, but it does increase income taxes to 9% for married couples who have taxable income of roughly $149,000 a year.
Well, the revenue that the revenue proposals that the Senate has in its tax bill are focusing around trying to be consistent with the philosophy that the Senate has had as we work through the reform division of having a little lower rate and a little broader base. Our income tax proposal is to raise the third tier to 9.4%. That affects about 6% of Minnesotans directly. When you include the marriage credit interaction, it comes closer to 7%. It's about $165,000 of W-2 income for a married filing joint. Another component of revenue is the Senate is planning on eliminating the inflator on the statewide business property tax. We know that there's been some discussion about that in the past. As we look back over the history of that, some years the market value for that class of property goes up, some years it goes down. It was a little uncertain as where we should start, so we decided to start the rate back at the 2002 rate. As in the reform division, we are increasing the cigarette tax to 94 cents. We are including little cigars in the definition of cigarettes, and other tobacco products are going to have about a 20% increase. Moving on to the property tax relief. Really, the effort here is primarily about lowering levies and reducing costs for local governments. The Senate Tax Committee is taking Senator Reinhardt's effort with regard to the LGA formula redo. The city groups have worked well together to come up with a formula that we think is much better if it's fully funded and will serve the state well as we go forward. The only change that the Senate is making from the group's proposal is that we have removed the adjustment for inflation. We are proposing $40 million in county program aid and no changes to the formula. Appears like the county program aid formula is working well. And in recognition that all our units of government are providing services to Minnesota residents, and these services are a partnership with the state, we think that we should include the townships, so we are proposing $5 million of township aid on a formula based on the percentage of ag land in the township, and we can walk through that in more detail if you choose. We also are proposing that we take another run at reducing school levies. As you know, the K-12 bill was in this committee, I guess last week now, and the D12 committee does propose to reduce or eliminate 4 of the current school levies. They didn't quite have enough money to accomplish all 4 of those, so they did institute a very small new general education levy. The Senate tax bill is going to include the proposal that we heard earlier this year to buy off the bottom $300 of the voter-approved referendum. Was one of the Governor's Task Force on Education's recommendation. We think would be a good effort to do. We are also going to equalize this at not quite twice the equalizing level that it currently is at. And we also are proposing to adopt the Governor's recommendations with regard to the renter's credit. With regard to cost reductions for local units of government, we are proposing to eliminate the sales tax for cities and counties. Currently, it's eliminated for townships. We think that eliminating this process where cities and counties collect property tax and then remit it to the state in the form of sales tax is cumbersome and duplicative and should be eliminated. So we're trying to attack property tax at its source by reducing levies and reducing costs. The economic development component of the tax bill, we're really trying to do a couple of things, but mostly we are trying to invest in the state with the understanding that these investments will pay us back over a period of time. As we propose to make these aids and credit changes that affect the entire state, we think that we need to use state dollars in these investments and therefore pay the state back. The economic development is focused at improving our communities, our businesses, our entrepreneurs, and our people to bring job creation to Minnesota. First, the communities. Besides the aids and credits, we are planning on investing in the host community of our state's largest employer, Rochester. We are investing in Rochester's infrastructure so the city can continue to grow as fast as our state's largest employer does. Rochester needs to keep up with Mayo's growth. We think that this is a wise use of state resources. We think that the medical care that's provided in Rochester is very valuable to the state. And we think that with this very reasoned approach that we've been working on this session that protects the Minnesota taxpayer, Rochester and Mayo and the state will continue to grow, and we're excited about that. There is another proposal in Maplewood, 3M, Research and Development Lab. We're proposing to provide that facility a sales tax exemption on construction materials. There's a facility in Brooklyn Park, a pharmaceutical company. We're proposing to give them a construction material exemption also. There's an industrial measurement company in Shakopee. We think they should qualify for the same thing. And really, the policy change here from previous years is that the state is playing a role in these economic development projects as opposed to just the local communities or taking a portion of fiscal disparities or some other regional effort. We think the state should be playing a role in this. The other thing that we are doing in the Reform Division, and I think Senator Est will talk about this, is we are eliminating the cumbersome sales tax process that they have to apply for their capital equipment exemption. We're proposing to make that an upfront exemption. Investing in entrepreneurs and the people of the state. We're continuing the angel investor credit and expanding that. We're continuing our investment in the historic building credit. We're proposing a Greater Minnesota Business Expansion Credit that'll give rural Minnesota businesses a capped sales tax exemption and a capped jobs credit. In the corporate income tax area, reform that is in the division report that we will be talking about, the R&D research credit is strengthened. We're including a component to encourage data centers to locate in our state. We think we have some climatic advantages in that we're a cooler place, and the heat that they generate, we tend to have lower energy costs. We think it's good to work toward bringing those facilities to the state. We're proposing that Greater Minnesota Internship Program, so students in rural Minnesota will have an opportunity to be internship in local businesses. And we're including a couple of provisions dealing with the rural dentistry, MA subtraction for dental providers, and then some support for a critical access dental clinic. Additionally, we're planning on doubling the past military service credit and increasing the combat zone upfront exemption to $200 upfront credit. And lastly, we have a sports memorabilia tax in here. We think that 5% of that ought to go to youth sports activities in the state, modeling that on the, I believe it's the Hennepin County?
Twins.
Hennepin County provision. I'm going to briefly touch on some of the reforms that Senator Rest and the division worked on. The philosophy was to really modernize our tax system around the way our economy is operating, and also broaden the base and lower the rate. In the corporate area, we're lowering the rate by closing loopholes. We're lowering the rate to 9%, getting Minnesota to the lowest rates it's had since the 50s. Sales tax, we're also broadening the base, lowering the rate. This matches the purchasing patterns of Minnesotans. We will include the nexus provision in here and a number of other sales tax expansions. This is also the sales tax reform area where the sales tax exemption for cities and counties, the dollars come from, and where the dollars come from to give the businesses their upfront capital equipment exemption. As I've already mentioned, we're doing the LGA formula redo. We're adding little cigars to the definition of cigarettes so that these are not marketed to the children of the state. I'm proposing a redo of the ag homestead credit, one of the most cumbersome processes we have in our classification system. And as we presented to the committee earlier this year, it's a major streamlining of that and requiring farmers to actually live on the farm in order to qualify for the homestead credit. And in conclusion, Madam Chair, when this provision becomes law, we will have accomplished the main goal of this session, and that's to balance the budget for the next 4 years. Additionally, we will have reformed the sales and corporate code by broadening the base and lowering the rates, major economic development projects, and we will have strengthened our partnerships with local governments and lowered their costs. Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions.
Of the bill that has the increase in the income tax. I don't believe we had a hearing on the governor's income tax proposal. I don't recall that we had one here on this one. I'm wondering if we could talk about the differences between the two proposals.
Senator Skoe?
Well, I'm trying to recall. I think the governor has a fourth tier at 7.85%. We have 9.85%, and we have a third tier at 9.4%.
Well, and Madam Chair.
Senator Ortman, I think if you wanted to look at the impacts, we do have on line 4 of the lines 4 and 5 of the spreadsheet the difference between the governor's proposal at his rate at the fourth tier and the Senator Skoe's proposal at just changing the third tier. Direct your attention there, but you certainly go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering, the governor's fourth tier applied at what income level? Say for married couples.
250? It's 250.
I think.
Ms. Pollack.
Madam Chair, the original governor's bill, the fourth tier applied at income over $250,000 for married couples filing jointly at 9.85%, singles $150,000, and for unmarried individuals and heads of household $200,000.
And if I'm correct in reading it, then what Senator Skoe in this bill proposes is a new tax rate of 9.4% on married couples that earn over $140,960. Am I reading that correctly?
Madam Chair, Senator Ortman, yes.
And 9.4% on individuals that earn $79,730.
Madam Chair and
Senator
Senator Ortman,
Skoe.
yes.
Well, may I ask what the reasoning is for applying that higher income tax other than raising revenue on folks that make $79,000 a year or $140,000 per married couple. It's a pretty extensive tax imposition.
Senator Skoe.
Madam Chair and Senator Ortman, we did look at doing a fourth tier that was at a 4 or 5% of Minnesotans. We realized that the third tier impacted 6% of Minnesotans. We didn't think it made much sense to have a fourth tier at 4% and a third tier at 2% of Minnesotans, so we raised the third tier.
Well, to the extent that there was an effort here to tax the rich, I think this is not it. I think this is a failure. I think at $140,000, these are middle-class, hardworking Minnesotans and not representative of the rich.
Senator Skoe.
Madam Chair and Senator Ortman, the average family income, which is family income in Minnesota, is $54,000.
One client, friend up in my area that is near retirement age, and he probably DFL, frankly, but he said, I can handle our...
That's an okay thing to be.
Why? I don't know. I mean, he's successful, but anyway, Madam Chair, with all respect...
I'm going to remember that, Senator.
But it was interesting, his comment was to me, he said, you know, I can handle the income taxes that I'm paying. This was before this bill. He said, but I'm, you know, I'm getting ready to retire, and you got to do something about those estate taxes. Otherwise, you know, why should I stay in Minnesota? Because I'm paying all the way through, and then you're going to take it at the end. And so I am very concerned about this entire bill related to people like him, where we didn't do anything about the estate taxes. We actually went up, and we're increasing the income tax. And, you know, there eventually is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back, where I'm concerned about an exodus of businesses that quietly leave Minnesota. They're not going to make waves. They're just going to expand and do things elsewhere, and I'm just very concerned about that, Madam Chair.
The bill was laid over and will be taken up again by the Tax Committee on Wednesday. And you can follow the work of the Senate by following us at Senate Media Services on our Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube accounts.